So I have once again waited way too long, like way too late in the day to film this video, so I am going to be racing the straight on sunlight that is about to be coming through this window. So let's just get through this as quick as possible. Hello, welcome to the video. So today I'm just gonna go over the books that I read in July, give you quick little reviews about them, and be on my way because, again, I'm racing the sunlight here. I read 6 books in the month of July. I had 3 3-stars, 2 4-stars, and 1 5-star. I'm gonna go over them in the order that I finished them, but that is the general breakdown if you care. So the first book that I read in July was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was one of my 4-star books, and as everyone says to do, I listened to the audiobook for this one. And my basic review is I did not like the characters, but I really enjoyed the story. Like, I got really sucked into the story, and I kept forgetting that it wasn't about a real band. Like, I kept having to remind myself that the Six was not a real band. So if you have not read Daisy Jones and the Six, a quick summary of it. Again, I read it over a month ago now, so do I even remember what it's about? In Daisy Jones and the Six, it is told in like transcripts of an interview. That's the basic format, and the audiobook is a full cast production, so it just gives you that extra level of immersion. But basically, we are following this band called the Six. It was started by 2 brothers, and we are following Daisy, who was basically like a child prodigy. She was known around LA, I think, for her singing from a very young age, from like 13, 14 years old. And we're just kind of following the story of her becoming the front woman for the Six. They produced an album together, and the relationships that kind of went along with that collaboration. Think Fleetwood Mac, basically. I feel like it's pretty much based on Fleetwood Mac. So if you know anything about the drama they had, it's kind of similar to the drama in the book. I gave it 4 stars, like I said, but like, it wasn't, I just really didn't like the characters. I couldn't get behind any of the characters, their actions. I like a book that has at least one character that I can root for, and I feel like there were none in this book. So it was good. I gave it 4 stars. Not like a new favorite or anything. I'm not gonna like run out and buy a copy because I have to have it on my shelves. But again, just the fact that I was so immersed in the story that I kept forgetting it wasn't a real band, like, that takes some real skill. So good on Taylor Jenkins Reid. She is by no means an underrated author, but I would definitely be willing to check out something else by her. This was my first book by her. And I would definitely be willing to read more from her in the future because she's a good writer. She's definitely a good writer. Next, I read Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal. He is a content creator on YouTube. He is in the productivity space. And this was basically a self-help type, how to be more productive style of book. There were a lot of tips and tricks that I've heard before in other books and stuff, but he did, as the title suggests, put them in the context of like not toxic positivity or like hustle culture type positivity. Oh, hi Cooper. He kind of rounded them up in a way that was like, hey, you don't have to kill yourself to be productive. Like, you can do this and still feel good in life. It was very sciencey, which is kind of to be expected because he is a doctor. So science is kind of his thing. But in general, I liked it. I got a couple of good nuggets out of it. Like I said, most of it I've heard before, but I enjoyed it. And he did read the audiobook himself. So if you are into audiobooks that are read by the authors, this would be a good one to check out if you're interested in productivity at all. My 1 5-star for the month was The Serpent on the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. Again, 5 stars. I was absolutely hooked on this book from the beginning. I had trouble putting it down and I was just reading like giant chunks of it at a time, which I don't normally do. I have said before that I tend to listen to a lot of audiobooks because I have a long commute to work every day, like to and from work. So I can get through audiobooks very quickly, but I don't necessarily have a ton of time to just sit and read physically. So the fact that I read this physically and super quickly is kind of a testament to, sorry, if I keep looking over here, we have sunflowers that I can see through the window and there are just bees all over them. So I'm just like watching, I keep getting distracted by the bees flying around. The Serpent and the Wings of Night, if you are unfamiliar with this book, it has been kind of hyped on BookTube and BookTok. It is a vampire book. So in The Serpent and the Wings of Night, we are following our main character, Aurea. She was orphaned at a young age and taken in by a vampire king. And so she was raised by this vampire king, and her like main purpose in life is to get powerful enough to take revenge on the people that killed her parents, or to like avenge her parents basically. And to do this, she plans to enter a competition. So this is a competition story. The whole book is based around a competition where the winner of this competition is granted their like deepest desire, like a wish by, I believe it's like the goddess of this world. I don't remember the specifics. Okay, I read it a while ago. But basically, the winner of this competition is granted like their one wish or given their biggest desire or whatever. And hers, again, is to be powerful enough to avenge her parents' death. So in this competition, Aurea meets Rain, who is a member of a rival sect of vampires, but she kind of teams up with him to get farther in the competition with the agreement that they're gonna use each other to get as far in the competition as they can, but when it comes down to it, they are ready and willing to kill one another to come out on top. And that's basically the plot of the story. It goes from there. So we are just following these two characters through this competition, and I don't know, it was just so good. Like, I loved it so much, and I have already picked up the sequel in August. So I loved it. If you are at all interested in like slow burn fantasy romance, enemies to lovers, vampire stories, competition stories, I recommend it. And that was kind of a high point because then we led into 3 straight 3-star books, which doesn't sound horrible, except for the fact that I had really high hopes for one of them, and it ended up being a 3-star, teetering on potentially less. No, I don't think I would have given it less. I think it's a pretty solid 3-star. But the book that I'm talking about is House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. This series kind of like, it went like this. It started at 5-star, then we went down to House of Sky and Breath at a 4-star, and then House of Flame and Shadow at like a low 3-star. And that is super disappointing to me because House of Earth and Blood is so highly rated, and like I loved ACOTAR so much, like everyone else, I guess, that the fact that the 3rd book in this series ended up being 3 stars was just horrendous to me. So in the first book in the series, House of Earth and Blood, we're following our main character, Bryce Quinlan, as she is trying to figure out, with the help of she was kind of enlisted by the kind of police of this society, to figure out what happened to her best friend Danica, who was brutally murdered 2 years before. Like, the start of the book is 2 years earlier than the main meat of the story. And yeah, so at the very beginning of the book, her best friend is murdered brutally, and the rest of the book we are trying to figure out exactly what happened to that friend, like what happened that night. And what I didn't like about book 3, without getting into too many details, is there are certain characters. Okay, how can I do this without spoilers? There are certain characters in this book that I feel like act out of character. And also, there is another book that I probably needed to read before I read this book because I felt like I was missing a lot of information. I feel like if you're interested at all in this book, you already know what I'm talking about, but for the select few that may not be familiar, I'm trying really hard not to spoil it. But I feel like I was just missing information that I needed to read this book and have a full understanding of what was happening. But even without that, I feel like characters were acting not as they would be expected to act. Characters were acting out of character sounded a little too redundant, but I feel like the way I went instead didn't really help me at all. So yeah, I didn't think the characters were acting how they should have been, and some of the characters were making stupid decisions just for the purpose of plot progression, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like the interactions between the characters. I didn't like the way they were acting. I felt like the story was a little convoluted. I feel like the ending was annoying. So it wasn't my favorite. It wasn't my favorite. And 3 stars, I think it's solidly in the 3-star range. Like, I don't think I would have gone lower than that. But I just had such high expectations and they were not met at all. Even going in knowing that people were not super happy with the book, I still ended up being disappointed somehow. So that was that. I'm not going to talk anymore about it. It was sad for me, but at least that was the end of the series, I think. Actually, no, I think there's going to be more books. Like, not necessarily in that series, but like companion series. So that's not great. Or maybe it will be. I don't know. Let's move on. Next, I read A Countess Below Stairs by Eva Ibbotson. I enjoyed this. I read this for my Simplify the Stacks video project. And this was the only book that I actually managed to finish for that project. I did DNF 2 books, so I'm not really going to talk too deeply about them, but if you're interested, I will link that video, like episode 1 up above, so you can check it out. And that being said, I also won't go into super detail here, but yes, this is a historical romance that takes place around the time of the Russian Revolution. We are following Anna, who is a Russian countess who was forced to flee Russia and go live in England. And in that kind of escape, her family lost all of their wealth. They were forced to leave like their family treasures behind. She decides to take a position as a maid in kind of like a failing estate run by an earl who is really not interested in keeping it afloat, except for the fact that he made a promise to his brother before his brother died that he would take care of it. So that is kind of the general gist of the beginning of this book, and then we're just kind of following her. At first, I was not a huge fan of this because I didn't really love the writing style, and I thought the story was a little bit boring, I guess. But like once I got used to the writing style, I ended up realizing that it is very witty and the characters are very witty, and I did find myself kind of chuckling here and there throughout the book. So I did give it 3 stars. Like, it's not a new favorite by any means, but I would definitely be willing to check out other books by the author. And finally, the last book that I actually finished in the month of July was The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, and I gave this 3 stars as well. This series is very popular, or it was very popular on BookTube, and maybe if I had read it back then, I would have not necessarily enjoyed it more, but like maybe the hype would have kind of kept me in it a little bit more. But for me, it was kind of just okay. What do I even remember about it? It was the last book that I read in July, and I already forget everything about it. The Raven Boys. The sun is basically here, so I need to do this quick. In The Raven Boys, we are following our main character, Blue. She is part of a family that kind of has like psychic abilities and like psychic magic, but she herself does not have any of these abilities. She's more of an amplifier. So like if she's in the room, their powers are stronger. And our other characters are these kind of, and she's kind of like, I feel like middle class basically. And then our other characters are these boys from like an elite private school, and those are the Raven Boys. So those are our characters. As for the plot of this story, I don't really remember it. So the book opens, and I will preface this by saying I found both the beginning of this book and the ending of this book quite confusing and convoluted. But from what I remember of the plot, is basically at the beginning of the book, we are following Blue, and she's doing some sort of like ritual with her mother on some like psychic holiday. Psychic is not the word that I'm looking for. What is the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but it's like an important holiday, like an important night for people who have psychic powers. And on this night, she somehow, although remember, Blue doesn't have powers herself, she somehow manages to come in contact with a kind of like a spiritual entity of someone who introduces themselves as Gansey. And then it just kind of shuts down. And that's it for that. Then she's working at this pizza shop, and this boy comes over to talk to her, and one of his friends is named Gansey. So she then gets kind of tied up with these boys, trying to figure out like why she saw Gansey that night and like what that means. The kind of subplot of this is like Blue has been told her entire life that she will kill the first boy she falls in love with or something like that. So at the same time, she's also trying to just stay away from these boys because she doesn't want to fall in love with any of them. That's like all I can really tell you about this book, even though I read it not that long ago. That's all I remember. It was okay. Like I said, it was a little confusing. It was a little convoluted. I didn't really care for the characters that much, which seemed to be kind of a trend with my books this month, huh? I said that about at least 2 of these books. The one thing I will say about the Raven Boys is it did leave off on a cliffhanger, so it was intriguing enough that I might pick up the next book, but I'm not in any way saying I will definitely finish the entire series. Okay, so this did not go nearly as fast as I had hoped it would, but those are the 6 books that I read in the month of July, as well as I did DNF a couple books. Like I said, that video is linked above to see what that was about if you're interested. Okay, the sun is officially here. So I am going to wrap this video up here. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what your favorite book that you read in the month of July was. I will see you in my next video. Bye.